prior to Trump, I started around 2013, 2014. I started to get really disillusioned with the state of our politics, and seeing that the current options and the current system really was not serving people. And as someone who got into it, motivated really to serve and motivated to small d, democratize politics, to give people a greater voice in the process, I started to get more reform minded, and Trump really accelerated that.
It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast an awesome civic entrepreneur and former vice presidential candidate. That's right. She was Evan McMullin's running mate in 2016, and she's been doing good before and since. Mindy Finn. Welcome, Mindy.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's great to be here and see you again.
Yeah, great to see you as well. We saw each other last in D.C. at one of those Save Democracy conferences. Has democracy been saved yet? I guess not. So you and I are still in the thick of it. So right now you're the CEO of Citizen Data, which you started a number of years ago. You guys just came out with a fascinating new report. What is Citizen Data?
Yeah, so Citizen Data is a data analytics and research company. We're actually a company, but all for social impact, that was really responding to the need for better nonpartisan data in the political sphere and policy and cultural sphere that can truly help us to bridge divides. The major investments and plays politically, just like it's been in kind of all parts of our ecosystem when it comes to data, have been for Republicans to win or Democrats to win, or to win very hot button ideological Republican policy fights or Democratic fights. And so we just thought there was a real opportunity for an infrastructure that could serve what we kind of anticipated would be a growing need for data and analytics that can bridge divides and chart a new path forward.
Well, you were prescient and on the spot and building exactly what we all need. But you got into this work a bit before then. Can you trace your career path a little bit? You worked in tech and then wound up in the intersection of tech and politics. How the heck did you start heading down this path?
Yeah, no, it's I've been a little bit of a unicorn. Unfortunately, not your classic tech unicorn, that makes billions of dollars in a company, but from a political perspective, in that I started actually my career as a journalist very early on. Just had this interest, did have an interest in politics and service and covering politics, and just happened to have an internship my senior year, where I was assigned to write for a newspaper in Connecticut, and my first day on the job was 9/11.
Wow.
And yeah, talk about getting thrown right into the deep end. So suddenly, like, the reason a student, 20-year-old like me, had an opportunity to write and cover Washington is, at the time, no one really cared that much what was happening in Washington. Back when we had newspapers, those stories were back of A section or B section stuff. But suddenly I was covering 9/11. But also, as part of those internships, I kind of, the internet obviously was on the rise in journalism, but it wasn't taken seriously enough that serious journalists were really paid to do it, or there was any budget dedicated. So I had a lot of opportunity to kind of write and cover my own stories and my own topics. I did that for CQ, which is now kind of folded into Roll Call. And also for kind of local newspapers, and taught myself how to code and how to do Photoshop and the basics things that you would need, because had to be a one woman
Wow.
show, so to speak. So after 9/11 in college, I decided I didn't want to be a journalist, because I did have opinions, and I wanted to actually be on the front lines and making a difference. And I made my way to Capitol Hill. And because of those skills that I had, I just kind of often was the person that was given the job to also, do the website. And then I was recruited to the Bush campaign in 2004 to this very new thing they all called it an e-campaign, which is kind of a funny name these days to think about, but it was essentially the early days of digital politics, and got what I call kind of a 10-year education in 1 year as part of a very small department on the forefront of digital politics for the Bush reelect. And it led to a near kind of decade plus career as a digital kind of a techie, a digital entrepreneur within the political system, and to time at Twitter and working for Google and whatever. But really, prior to Trump, I started around 2013, 2014, I started to get really disillusioned with the state of our politics, and seeing that the current options and the current system really was not serving people. And as someone who got into it, motivated really to serve and motivated to small d, democratize politics, to give people a greater voice in the process, I started to get more reform-minded, and Trump really accelerated that.
Well, heck, I mean, you did the craziest thing possible, which is you joined up with Evan McMullin in his presidential campaign in 2016, which I saw as a very, very noble effort. It might have swung a state like Utah, where I think Evan got 20% or so. And I joke sometimes, Mindy, that I appreciate all the people who worked on my presidential campaign because it was such an objectively unwise career move. People aren't exactly going into a campaign like that thinking, I'm going to wind up on Capitol Hill straight after this campaign. So how long had you known Evan, and how did you get involved with that campaign so directly?
So I certainly did not plan to run for vice president in 2016, or maybe ever. To be honest.
Well said.
And so
you were like, I was just going to wait a cycle or two before I do my hat in the ring.
There was an old friend kind of in digital politics, Adam Connor, remarked at the time, like, I've long said the digital leaders on campaigns should start to become more campaign managers and senior staff, but Mindy's leapt even further ahead and is running for vice president. But I had been an early leader in the Never Trump movement. Kind of a funny piece of lore is that I'm sometimes credited with starting the hashtag Never Trump.
Well done.
There were a few of us founded a PAC that was called hashtag Never Trump, and raised some money to try. It was too little, too late, but we did have some success in Ohio and other states. But he was already catapulting to the nomination at that point. And as part of that, was hooked up with this effort that was trying to get ballot access for kind of a last ditch Hail Mary, independent run, and had been working on recruiting people like Colin Powell or General Mattis or Condi Rice or something. When Evan's campaign folks reached out and asked if I would meet with him to first just advise on strategy and that kind of thing. And they arranged a phone call with me and him, a meeting actually. And they said, just to prepare you, I think he's going to ask you to play Jill Stein in debate prep because there might be the CNN debate among third-party candidates. So I thought, okay, that's why me, but I guess I'm a petite Jewish woman and I've been around campaigns a lot and done some debate prep, so it could be kind of fun, and whatever, I'll take the phone call. So there was a grilling on this phone call about my policy positions, about my character, about a number of things that I thought was all a precursor, and he told me he was likely to ask me something at the end of the call. I thought that question was going to be, will you play Jill Stein in debate prep? Instead, at the end of that conversation, the question was, would you consider I need to find a running mate, and would you consider being my running mate? That was a surprise. And I didn't have much time to really decide. And so the time I actually had, I think my kids were like 2 and 3. Again, as I said, I had business things going on. I talked to my husband, but also what you said struck a chord, which is I did reach out to some friends and said, very confidentially, what do you think? And their first reaction was, well, you do realize this could kill your career. So have you thought about that? It's like, if you want to do it, you should do it. I understand why you might be morally motivated to do it, but it could be a career killer. And I went in knowing that may be the case. And I wouldn't say it was a career killer, but it certainly closed a lot of doors on the path that I had been on before.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. What the heck is Helix Sleep? It is the mattress of the future company. I have always been someone who valued my sleep. Figured, you're going to do it for 7, maybe even 8 hours. You wake up feeling refreshed and energized. What is that worth? Helix Sleep can help make that happen. Just take their sleep quiz and figure out what personalized mattress should be shipped straight to your door, and you have 100 days to return it. I don't recommend returning it after 99 days, but hey, who am I to say? Don't take my word for it. It's the #1 rated mattress from GQ and Wired. Can you imagine being the mattress tester? It's a job. Someone has it. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners right now. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. Well, in terms of closing a lot of doors, you mean within the Republican Party, you'd worked with a lot of Republican campaigns. And the Republican Party right now is facing a resurgent Trump candidacy. A lot of people feel like it's 2016 all over again. What do you think the greatest hopes are in terms of not having Trump as the nominee again in 24?
So I have been pretty consistent, unwavering in not underestimating Donald Trump from the beginning, and I am still there. I think as a country we have been late to, and we've underestimated the threat in a lot of time. Not when I say we, obviously that's not everybody, but collectively there's more people that have kind of underestimated the threat and then came to understand it later. But we've also kind of underestimated his political longevity and his political talent and appeal. I mean, he's incredibly popular. He's lost, obviously, some popularity within the Republican Party from his peak, but he still has a strong and extremely loyal base. And he still is able to benefit from a politics of fear and grievance and victimhood. And so the more that he is under attack, that strengthens him, which we saw with the recent indictments. And so given all that, kind of to get to the punchline on it, I think he's the presumptive nominee in the Republican Party today. I thought that a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, if he decided to run again. And from everything that I've analyzed, I don't unfortunately see that changing. And I talked to a lot of other political prognosticators, even in battleground states, and I do think there's a little bit of I understand it. You got to be hopeful, or you don't get into politics, right? You got to believe in the impossible and go for it. But kind of crafting out these various scenarios for others to get to the nomination that I'll go for it. Like I'm all for them. I think they should try, and Trump should have competition and challenge and face real serious competition. But right now, he's the presumptive front runner and most likely nominee.
So aside from Ron DeSantis, who do you think is the greatest challenge to Trump, either data-driven or from your gut, shooting from the hip? I'll just throw out, I feel like Tim Scott has like a really good energy and profile and has a high ceiling, and I hear really good things about him from people that know him. So that's one of my dark horses. Like, do you have him or another?
Yeah, right. So I think it has to be somebody. I mean, I think it's going to be a really tough road for anyone, but it would need to be somebody who actually can differentiate themselves from Trump. Not somebody who's been a never Trumper. That's not going to work in the party, but someone who has a unique, who can operate in a unique lane, which DeSantis' problem is he doesn't entirely do that. Obviously, people like Mike Pence don't do that. Nikki Haley has struggled to do that. Many of the other candidates struggle to do that. I think someone like Tim Scott could potentially do that. Asa Hutchinson is someone I would like to see also be successful because he has been a successful governor of a ruby red state, and actually was able to bridge divides and get some really practical things done amid, again, a very ideologically conservative state. He, I think, managed COVID much better than others. So he has, we saw how he operated in a crisis. I think it's a tough road for these folks, but it would be a Tim Scott or an Asa Hutchinson. If a Sununu ran, that would be, somebody who I certainly would be rooting for as well.
So you decide to say yes to Evan, even though, I guess you understood there could be some profound ramifications. And Trump was very much in control or about to be in control of the party at that time. What were your experiences like on the trail? Were you concerned about, frankly, threats to your physical safety? What was campaigning with Evan like?
Yeah. So in many ways, first of all, I would say it was overall just a incredible experience and really transformative in my life. So I would do it 10 times over, even though it was only for a couple of months. I like to say I got sort of in many ways the best ways of running for, on a presidential ticket, in that it was short lived. One didn't have to do it for 2 years, 4 years. We didn't have to spend that much time raising money because we just didn't raise much money and it was too late. And we didn't have, years of oppo flying at us. We did have some oppo, and I'll get to the safety point in a minute. And I got to really run with a partner. Like, we both were first time candidates, kind of having to figure it out as we went. And then I think the thing that was kind of the theme around our campaign was just that we were giving voters an affirmative and a positive pro-democracy option at a time when voters were very dissatisfied with the two options. They saw both these candidates as corrupt. It was very much, as it has tended to be, there was a hold your nose effect, where you would hear a lot from voters that they were having to go to thinking about going to the polls and having to hold their nose for one of those candidates, Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. Whereas our supporters would come and say, thank you so much for giving me an affirmative option that we can go to the polls and vote for and be really proud, walk out with our head held high that we voted for you, with your positive message, with your bridge building message, with your pro-democracy message, your anti-corruption message and beyond. And so I just found it incredibly inspiring, especially when students would say, this is my first time casting a vote. And I kind of didn't imagine this, the way the presidential cycle had shaped up. I couldn't have imagined that. And now I get to vote for you. Or, veterans who had said something similar, just in the states we campaigned in, which were limited, but just Utah is where we ended up spending the most time at the end. You just saw real retail kind of local politics. Was just a ton of self-organizing, people organizing their own events for us, setting them up at their town hall to make sure they had an opportunity to hear from us. And it really felt like the best of America. On the other hand, we did, especially once we started to catch, at least a bit of fire in Utah and appear to be a threat there. The Trump campaign in particular sent hecklers and detractors to our events, who would cause a lot of problems and be yelling and screaming. There were threats to our safety. There were cryptic letters that were sent to my home while I was traveling, where my husband
Terrible.
and young children were at the time, that, we had to, turn into the FBI. We ended up having to get security at the end. We couldn't qualify, we didn't qualify for Secret Service. It was kind of too late anyway. So we had to hire our own private security. It was, sometimes when I reflect back, it was moving so quickly that I couldn't even fully appreciate at the moment the type of risk that we may have been facing. But it was certainly there, and it certainly reminds me now of the types of risks, obviously all people in public life face, but a lot of the election officials who had to stand up, particularly against their own party, for the legitimacy of the 2020 election results.
It's gotten darker since even that cycle, though. Thank you for your service and your courage, and congratulations on giving people something positive to vote for. So again, you did get, I want to say, about 20% of the vote in Utah, which is a freaking ton. I mean, if you think about it.
Yeah, so in Utah, it was like a little over 21%. I mean, at one
Wow.
point, we were actually pulling ahead or even with the other candidates. Trump actually, he didn't come to Utah, but he sent Pence there. And Pence's big message, it was very clear and it was really powerful. It was really about two things. One was the Supreme Court, and kind of like, you need to vote for Republican to get our judges on the Supreme Court, and also just come home. Come home to the Republican Party. This is home to you, which is really pretty interesting. We think about politics as really serves this role in people's lives, of this place where they belong as their identity. And Pence tapped into that for the campaign. He told people, come home. And that really was effective, for those Republicans. But we still, we got over 21% of the vote. And in Idaho, we got 12%. I believe, we weren't not all these ballots were counted everywhere because they don't count them unless they're going to make a difference on the outcome. But we got the highest number of presidential write-in votes sort of in any cycle ever, up to that point. So I'm very, very proud of what we were able to do on a shoestring budget. The dollar per vote couldn't be beat in terms of the amount spent versus what we did. And more importantly, it was the message we were able to get across and form the foundation for a new movement in politics, which continues today. And, you've really taken the mantle and are running with.
It's awesome that you frankly managed to get their attention to the point where they had to divert Pence to head to Utah, because the last thing anyone thought was going to happen was they had to spend time in Utah. so you guys did great.
Yeah, it was really funny, actually, because Trump started to talk about our campaign, not even at his rallies. As we know, he's a little bit sensitive, you might say. And so he didn't like the fact that there was any kind of challenge. And so he's like, there's this guy, Evan McMullin, who's, campaigning, going coffee shop to coffee shop in Utah, which is pretty funny because notoriously, Utah is a heavily
they don't really drink
Mormon
so much
state.
coffee,
Most
right?
of them don't drink much coffee. Yeah. So it shows how much he knew about it.
Three-quarters of Americans wish they started investing earlier, and over 2/3 of Gen Zers feel the same way. You know why it's tough? It's because it's tricky. It's daunting. It's intimidating. You know who has started an app to solve that? Are the founders of Bloom. Bloom app is the award-winning financial services app. It's made by young people for young people. I've met the founders. They are great guys who want to make you or the people in your life who are young and just starting out financially literate. Check it out at bloomapp.com, and there's a special offer for listeners to this podcast, $15 in free stock and 1-month subscription for free. Go to bloomapp.com/yang to sign up today, bloomapp.com/yang. Why stay in the dark in terms of financial literacy? Let's get educated, people. bloomapp.com/yang. So you transitioned from there to just trying to movement build, along with Evan, Stand Up Republic, which became Renew America, which now merged with the Forward Party. So some of your former colleagues are now colleagues of mine, including folks like Miles Taylor. And then you simultaneously, I think, also started working on what became Citizen Data. So what was the evaluation process like after the McMullin campaign? You guys sit together and be like, okay, guys, that was great. We got all of these, tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of votes. There are all these people want what we put out there into the marketplace. So let's build on this.
Yeah, that's right. I think Evan and I sat down, and I didn't make this clear earlier. We didn't know each other before we ran. We had a lot of mutual contacts and friends, but we didn't know each other. So we met through the campaign, but really formed a good, professional partnership. We're extremely aligned in the way that we saw the problems in the country and what we thought needed to happen moving forward. And I think when it was pretty quickly, we just really felt a responsibility to continue the momentum forward. Maybe able to relate to this from your experiences running, where you have these supporters who are they're so behind you, and they put all this effort in. And we obviously had a very grassroots, volunteer-driven campaign. And even though Trump won that, especially because Trump won that election, they're hungry for a place to connect and continue to build on that momentum and to fix our politics. And then I think the other thing that we really were concerned about is we started to learn about the existing kind of infrastructure, I should say, of nonprofits and advocacy organizations that were focused on democracy strengthening, is that there was a real risk with Trump's election that the whole cause of democracy would just become even more of a partisan cause, and meaning only the Democrats would be associated with democracy. And I think that's a really big problem for the country that we felt we needed to solve for. And so our whole kind of theory of change, the problem that we were seeking to solve for was, yes, to do grassroots movement building, but also to ensure that the fight for democracy, which was going to strengthen post-Trump, we knew it would become a cross-partisan or nonpartisan cause. and not only be kind of centered and held within the Democratic Party.
Well, heck, a lot of the folks who've joined Forward resemble people like you and Evan, where you would have classified yourselves as, let's call it, moderate Republicans 10 years ago, and then now the Republican Party has shifted into something else. And to me, it's one of the great problems is that you have, in my opinion, millions of principled, patriotic Americans who right now are like, well, I'm not in love with what's going on in my party, let's call it the Republican Party, but, certainly can't vote for anything with a D next to it. So, like, what are you going to do? And so the hope is that you could say, well, what you could do is join a group that actually is positive and stands for values, and it's not all about trying to defeat the other side all the time. And so you did that with Evan, with both the campaign and what became a New America. We're trying to do that with the Forward Party. And I'm sure there are all these people around you who resemble that. I was with Governor Christie Todd Whitman last night, the co-chair of the Forward Party, and she clearly resembles that.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. And, and you asked about kind of the citizen data. I think what ultimately, after a couple of years or so, when Evan and I were building Stand Up Republic and really starting to feel good that, tons of problems. We saw there was a lot of problems to solve in democracy, but more people were starting to realize that, right? Like, there's still a lot more growth that needs to happen, but there were more organizations, more leaders, more funders, more people pointed at the problem. What I started to feel was, I always kind of have this question, like, what is the highest value that I kind of personally can bring, to the country? Like, what is the unique thing that I can do at this moment? And it became clear that there was the need. There's a lot of infrastructure needs, but there was a data and research need, a need for the nonpartisan data side of things. And that's what my specialty had been within the Republican Party. I did a number of things, but kind of the last thing I did was oversee the data technology and digital apparatus really for the entire kind of RNC. And so this is something that, I can do. I can build this, and it's going to be needed, and it's going to take, time, obviously, for a more independent movement forward to grow and the ecosystem that you're tapped into. But we know this will be needed. So, let's start this and get moving. And it's been really, one thing that I love about it, I love a lot of things, but is that we really get to, we've obviously work with you and the Forward Party, as well as other nodes within this ecosystem, this morass of kind of organizations and leaders who, don't agree on everything. Sometimes they don't agree on many things policy-wise and have different experience, but kind of share this fundamental love for, obviously, America, for democracy, and this agitating for change and a better path forward. Like I keep like using your brand.
Just naturally, it just rolls off the tongue, Mindy.
Yeah.
That's why it's there. This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. In a tough economy, you're looking for ways to save money, and a sneaky way you can do it. ExpressVPN. Now, you're asking yourself, how is that possible? Doesn't ExpressVPN cost money? It does cost less than $7 a month, but it can help you unlock content that will save you money for days and days. What do I mean? For example, let's say I'm a Duran Duran fan, which I am. I want to watch the concert movie of Duran Duran, but it is not available on Netflix in the US. However, with ExpressVPN, I can just beam myself into the UK, click on Netflix, and voila. Duran Duran and a bunch of other content I could not have gotten any other way. It's a no-brainer. If you want to preserve your own data from the big tech companies and get more content and save money while you're at it, go to expressvpn.com/yang. Don't forget to use my link so you can get 3 extra months free. That's expressvpn.com/yang. expressvpn.com/yang to learn more. So, you guys came up with a fascinating report of many, I'm sure. I'm sure you're getting all sorts of data. So some of the takeaways from it were that, guess what? Turning off primaries actually really helps reduce extremism, where you're 3 times less likely to elect, let's say, an election denier or something along those lines. There's been a lot of data in the press recently from Gallup polls and other sources about the proportion of Americans who now identify as independents rising up to 49 or 50%. So you are someone who is on top of the data, unlike just about anyone else. What did you get out of the latest report, or really any of your recent findings?
Yeah, there's sort of this key piece, which I know you track really closely too, which is the willingness to vote for a third party or a different party than a Democrat or Republican candidate. And that number has kind of continued to grow. I mean, we have a majority of likely voters who are at least somewhat willing to vote for a third party candidate, if they say so, which is, obviously an important number to track. I think the other thing that was really critical in the research that we did pre-election in 2020 and post-election is that there's kind of this conventional wisdom among politicos, and even among researchers that democracy is just not an issue that voters really care about at all. They could care about quote unquote kitchen table issues, and democracy just doesn't matter. And what we found that's actually changing. So yeah, it was not the number one issue. By any means, the number one issue for voters tended to be inflation across the board. Republicans, some of them, it's immigration and safety, and for Democrats, abortion was a big one this year. But democracy was ranking, and protecting elections in particular was ranked right up there, 3 or 4, particularly in battleground states where voters really understand kind of the way that the system of democracy, the strength of our democracy, truly does matter. And I thought that was one of the more interesting things that really kind of cuts against this idea that democracy doesn't matter. And in fact, among voters that there weren't at that point, there weren't forward party options, but there were an expanded number of we call shifters or split ticket voters who would vote for a Democrat for one statewide office and a Republican for another statewide office. There were more of those in battleground states this year. And for those voters in particular, protecting elections, fair elections, ranked higher than kind of your mean voter, which really indicates that for them, it may have been a voting issue, even if it's not the issue that it's not the same as making sure they have enough money in their pocket. It's pretty close. So those are some of the things. I think the other thing that we do a lot of work on, and we tracked in this recent report, is just the energy behind reforming the primary system and giving voters, more options.
Yeah, most voters want it.
They vote it. Yeah, it's really popular. I mean, the only thing that's more popular, than that, when in kind of the realm of reform, is just money in politics. I mean, voters see that as really the biggest problem, and that's the harder one. I've been on panels about that. There's things you can do, but it's a harder nut to crack. But democracy reform really has a lot of momentum, and in each individual state that we've looked at it, as well as across the country, both Republicans and Democrats really want it. They want it. They want better representation, better options, more voice, more choice.
Yeah, almost 60% of Americans want to get rid of party primaries, so that's a great sign for, let's say, Nevada next year. And what percentage of Americans say they're at least open to voting for a third party?
60%.
About the same, 60%. Obviously, that's a lot higher than you need in theory. You don't even need 51%. You might need 35%. I'd actually tell people the real number of what you would need to get on board something like the Forward Party in earnest is only really more like 10%, because in a polarized country, you could swing a lot of races and do a lot of good with that kind of base.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think the thing to look at too is younger voters. So the trends.
Younger voters hate the parties.
Yeah. So younger voters are the most likely to identify as independent, be most dissatisfied with the two-party system, the most supportive of reform. Even, the youngest Republicans, there's a major delta between support for democracy reform among younger Republicans and older Republicans, which I think is a really strong, omen, and gives us a really good foundation to build on for the future.
Wow, Mindy, talking to you is so fun and encouraging. You've got so much good data. So let's say someone listening to this is like a relatively ordinary person. How can they keep up with you or even support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, they can go to our website, citizendata.com. I would say to definitely, we have a number of reports that you can download and take a look at. You can schedule conversations to talk to our team. If you're an organization that would benefit from data, we can serve you. Interestingly, we're not fundraising right now in the way that a nonprofit does. We've raised some rounds of funding in the past. We may do that again. So if there's someone out there who's really interested in that, feel free to get in touch with me at mindy@citizendata.com. But otherwise, please do check out our website. And in particular, I'd say download that political impact report, because that gives you a lot of the nuggets that you need to really build this new way in American politics and to truly understand what's happening and what the potential is for change.
There's so much good data in there. It's incredible. I'm going to close with a question about AI. So you're much more tech savvy than the average political actor or journalist, that's for sure. Like, what do you think about the arrival of AI in this election cycle?
Yeah, I think it's really, well, from my perspective, it's really exciting. I mean, I have concerns that many share about some of the ethical issues and the ways that it will be utilized, and just how fast it's moving is both exciting and scary, and I get that, and we can hold those two truths at the same time. But I'm really excited about it from the perspective of really just understanding the American public and being able to be responsive to their needs at scale. And I actually think that I'm not too concerned about the political ecosystem moving too fast, because the political ecosystem is just notoriously slow. There's a lot of kind of speculation, for example, that AI will just absolutely replace things like survey research, which our team does a lot of. And I don't actually think that will happen so fast, just because political people are just naturally slower to embrace change. But we're certainly using it. We've already been using a lot of sophisticated tools for natural language processing, even of survey results, of online conversation, for example, to understand what people care about and what they're talking about, to make sense and bring greater insight to the kind of American psyche and political it, if you will. So I'm really excited about it from that perspective, and certainly my team of data scientists and political number crunchers are having a field day with the increased openness to AI, new AI tools, and we are stay tuned, working on some fun things to be able to very quickly make best use of them as we head into the 2024 election cycle.
Well, that's a more positive view on it than a lot of other folks have, and we'll take it. Mindy Finn, CEO of Citizen Data, most importantly, a true American patriot leader. So excited to be working alongside you in this space. And who knows, maybe you'll wind up on another ticket at some point, another ballot.
Likewise, Andrew. We'll see. Maybe with a little more pre-planning this time.
Thanks so much, Mindy. And really, congrats on everything.
Likewise. Talk to you soon.